If you don't want a background color and you prefer to use an image, we can do that too. Now this gets a little bit more complex, or I shouldn't say complex, it gets a little more filling. There's a lot more to know than just the background image. Now first we're going to look at the background image, and this is how we do it. I selected all the divs in our page, background-image, colon, URL, bracket, and then you need an apostrophe or quotation around the link to your image. So here I just linked to background.gif, and it just happens to be that my image is in the same folder or directory as my current style sheet. And I just added a height of 60 so you can see how the background image displays. So first, the property is the background image. We just went over that. And we use the URL brackets and then the name. And around the name, again, are quotation marks. And around that are brackets. And that's the value. Now you don't have to link to an image that you have on your website or in your directory. You can use a direct link, for example, http://mywebsite.com/folder/image.jpg, or anything similar as well. If you can, try to actually have the image on your website. This is so that your image will load a little bit faster, and that the browser doesn't have to make another connection to another website just for this one image. Now instead of just using a URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. We can tell the background image property, and again this is a property, to either inherit as parent or use no background. So a class for no image would get rid of our image. We just change the value to none. The class of inherit image, the background image will inherit the same background image from its parent. And the one that we just saw from above, which is our star image, we used URL background.gif. All three of those are working examples. If you're handy in an image editor, such as the popular Photoshop, and you can create an image with a transparent background, saved as a PNG typically, you can use these backgrounds, and you can use a transparent background. The transparent background will stay transparent in your browser, and you can actually see through that part of the image to whatever is below it. By anything that's below it, I mean something that is behind it. That gets a little bit more into layers, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. Next, we're going to go over how we got it to repeat, or if we don't want it to repeat. So the example above that we just saw uses the star background image. The actual image is just this right here, the star. That is actually the image, and that repeats on the x-axis as well as the y-axis. Now an x-axis is your left and right, it's your horizontal. If you picture your page as a graph, it's everything from the left corner to the right corner. And your y-axis is the opposite. It's from top to bottom, or bottom to top if you prefer. And in case you're wondering, or you're not quite sure, if it does exist, there is a z-axis, and that is your depth. That's like the distance from your eyes to your browser right now. We'll cover the z-axis in a little while. We can control the repetition of our background images by using the background repeat property. The values to choose from are the ones below. So we have our background repeat, and we can choose inherit, no repeat, repeat, repeat X, or repeat Y. Also to let you know, as we get a little bit farther into CSS, I'm going to be doing this a little bit more often. Instead of demonstrating and creating full working examples for you guys, I'm going to write the CSS property. The first line underneath it is going to be all the values that are acceptable, and I will describe most of the values, to the exception of inherit. So inherit, and this is pretty much the same thing for every property, means it will take the background value from the HTML's parent element. No repeat means the image will not repeat and it will only show once. Kind of like up here how we have the star image. If we set background repeat to no repeat, then that's what it would show up with just one single star. Repeat is default, and it will repeat the image on the X and Y axes. Repeat X obviously will only repeat from left to right, and repeat Y will only repeat the image from top to bottom. It's also pretty precise. It is actually from top to bottom, not from bottom to top. If we look at the following code, it will display our images like so. So we have a row and a column, both are classes. Background image, I just chose star.png. So for row, we have background repeat is equal to repeat X. And this is the one here. This is our first one. Go from left to right. You don't have to worry about the width or height, that was just for the demonstration. Then we have column. Again, same thing, we use star.png. But for background repeat, we set it to repeat Y instead of repeat X. And what that does is it repeats the image from top to bottom, like we have in our second box. The attachment property will let us set whether or not the background image can scroll with the page or if it has to stay in place. This is pretty popular on Twitter pages where the background image is not allowed to scroll with the page. How we do that is we use the background attachment property, and the values are inherit, scroll, or fixed. Inherit, again, will take the value of its HTML parent. Scroll will allow the image to scroll with the page if the user moves the page up and down, whereas fixed is when the background image does not move on the page whatsoever. So before we go on, I want to take a second and show you exactly how the fixed value affects the background image. So here we have our star up here, and that would be our background image. And then we got a bunch of text, and the text just says this image will not move while my text does move. So I'm going to scroll my page up and down, and you notice that my background image does not move, and that's because we set the background attachment to fixed. Lastly, we have the background position property, and this property accepts multiple values. So background dash position is the property, and it accepts top, center, bottom, left, right, as well as inherit. And the background position accepts two answers, one for the x-axis and one for the y-axis. Remember, x is left and right, y is top and bottom. So here what we did was we added the image URL as star.png, that's our little star down there. We set background repeat to no repeat, so we only want it to show the image once. And we set the background position to center and center. The first center is your x-axis, and your second center is your y-axis. So the first one centered it horizontally along the x, and your second center put it in the middle along the y, which is vertical. Now the background position we can set two named locations like we just did, or you can choose the x position and y position using either pixels or a %. So instead of center and center, what we could have done is we could have done 100 pixels and then 500 pixels. Or we could have done 20% and then 30%. Now there's a little bit more to the entire background image concept, and that gets into more of the CSS3 stuff, which is a lot newer, and we're going to cover that in the CSS3 section.